pitch us the book? What's it about?
Oh, well, I was made to write a kind of one-line synopsis of it, which, I mean, if you know me, I'm not the most succinct person who's ever walked the planet. But I think the thing I said was something like, former communist rebel turned undocumented immigrant to California falls in love and grows the hell up. And I think that's really probably mostly what it's about.
Yeah,
And generally it's about a former communist rebel who comes from the Philippines to California to live with her family because she's living in exile, and essentially lives with her uncle, takes care of her younger cousin, meets a young woman, falls in love, and that's really it, I think.
Yeah, so that's Hero,
That's
the
Hero.
protagonist. Tell us a bit about, because I thought she was really interesting in terms of this idea. There's so much talked about protagonist, female protagonists in particular, being unlikable and all of those things. And she's been in the New People's Army and has been tortured and then has come to America. Why did you want to write about her?
Oh, I mean, I think for the longest time I didn't want to write about her at all. I was really uncomfortable actually writing about from her perspective, not because of the New People's Army or because she's unlikable. Those are the things that drew me to her, but mostly because she comes from a position of privilege, a kind of class privilege in the Philippines that I both didn't personally have experience with, and also just really felt uncomfortable putting as just having the main narrative sort of perspective in the book. But ultimately I think it was because of that discomfort that I was able in a way to be free with her and able to kind of yank the rug out from her, whereas when I was writing from characters in the book whose perspective I'm much more autobiographically close to, or who are from more working class, lower middle class families in the Bay Area, like the one I grew up with, I was really defensive. The writing was so closed, like there was no oxygen in their voices, there was no sort of oxygen on the page. So I think it was really when I started writing from, when Hero, the kind of character of Hero entered the house in Milpitas, that the kind of book opened up. And as for sort of unlikable sort of, I mean, those are always super sort of gendered words that sort of govern how we think about literary discourse. That's really just a way for us to kind of transmit our kind of cultural misogyny in how we think about characters.
And also with Hero, I wanted to talk about her bisexuality and bivisibility, because again, that's another cultural conversation that we're having. It's a big part of the book, but it's just who she is. Why was including that important for you?
I mean, I think probably in a just kind of basic personal way, it's important for me to depict bi characters because I'm a bi woman, I'm a bi woman of color. I look for bi women of color and bi characters in art and in fiction constantly. I recently found out that Tessa Thompson's character in Thor Ragnarok was canonically bi, and I was like, please tell me everything. So I think the bi erasure is a real thing. I remember I was reading a book by a writer, and I think in the first page of her book it was something like, you know, I identify as a bi woman, but I've been in a partner with this other woman for about 20 years. But on the jacket of the book it was like, black lesbian writer, da 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 da. And I was like, she literally has identified herself already in the book. So I think for me the kind of sort of multi-varied depiction of what queer life could look like is interesting to me, just because that's the kind of context that I come out of. I'm interested in, for example, like just queer women of color, queer immigrant women, but also queer suburban women, where the narrative of queerness isn't necessarily about sort of I come from a rural or suburban sort of space and then have to go to like the urban sort of center in order to be realized, which I mean, I really love a lot of those books and narratives, but I don't also know that it's not the reality for a lot of, you know, queer kids, and especially, you know, queer immigrant kids and queer kids of color. So I think for me it's about sort of thinking through how people live those nuances when they're living at vectors of, you know, Hero is a young queer woman, but she's also undocumented. She's also, you know, having to learn how to take care of a cousin. So how do you kind of capture the fullness of a life, in a sense, is what I'm interested in.